Welcome to the Teep Show, a show for UFC veterans and casuals alike, where we break down the latest comings and goings in the sport we know and love, mixed martial arts, particularly the UFC. It's been a while. It's so good to be back with another banger of a card to preview after the monstrosity that was UFC 309. If I had better editing, putting an ad here, we'd play taps for Stipe Miocic. What a career. Good guy, but man, JJ looked amazing, and Bones shut him out pretty much. So we're going to get right into it. A quick shout out of Around the Horn, which we're getting into. ESPN's Around the Horn is going off the air next year, which I think is such a shame, such a platform for up-and-coming journalists to make a name for themselves, for the personalities that aren't on TV to get on TV. So, the 13-year-old me is crying. I don't watch it anymore, but still a shame. Anyway, you guys don't care. You guys want to hear about UFC, and I don't blame you with this card we have. Quick Around the Horn. We have 2 title fights announced yesterday. This is for UFC 311, not down the road, but our next pay-per-view. Islam Makhachev will defend his belt against Arman Tsarukyan. We knew that was coming, but finally announced. They're squeezing it in before Ramadan for Islam, which is important because the other fight is Merab Dvalishvili is going to take on Umar Nurmagomedov on the same card. Absolutely stacked card. There's not a lot of other fights on that card yet. Peyton Talbot, who's the hottest prospect at bantamweight, is taking on a very game Raoni Barcelos. That's a huge test for him, but it doesn't really matter. Those 2 fights alone justify the cost of the pay-per-view, or if you're like some others, the cost of the illegal stream. This is interesting because Merab seemed to be ducking Umar with alacrity. Merab was asking for a rematch with Sugar Sean. He was saying that Peter Yan had a good performance and he wanted to fight him. He was looking at Figueiredo before the Yan fight, when everyone pretty much agreed the undefeated Umar was the guy to fight after he basically shut out Corey Sandhagen, who I think was 3 at the time, maybe 2 at the time even. So, when you're undefeated and you take down a top 5 guy, you're getting a title shot almost always. That just happened with Hamzat. It looks like he's getting the next title shot. He was ranked 11th, but again, undefeated, fought and beat Rob Whittaker again with alacrity. And if you're undefeated, beat a top guy, it's really hard. That's the hype train. It's really hard to keep you out unless the champion doesn't want to fight you, which it sounded like Merab did not want to fight him. Why would Merab not want to fight him? Easy. Umar's style is tailor-made for Merab. Merab has overwhelmed everybody, even other Russians like Petr Yan, with a cardio wrestling game that we've never seen before. He shot, I think, 49 times or 46 times on Petr. It's just a ridiculous amount. Not even trying to do too much with the takedown, just laying on you, putting his weight on you. Small baby punches, elbows from the top. Umar has got a takedown defense, worthy of the Nurmagomedov name. On top of that, he outstruck Corey Sandhagen, arguably. So it's really tough to see where Merab's going to have an advantage. I mean, that's crazy to say with the win streak Merab's been on and how he's dominated Petr and Sugar Sean back to back. Apparently, this came about when Merab stormed into Dana's office and said he was tired of being disrespected by Umar on Twitter. Now, the funny thing about that is, if you know anything about the Russian Twitter game, none of the Russians tweet their own stuff. They all have their manager, Ali Abdelaziz, do it for them. So, basically the manager got this fight, but that's his job. Good for Ali. Originally, Merab wanted to fight in March, but Umar would have been in Ramadan. Obviously, could not train, could not fight the way he needed to. So that will be an amazing one. Early odds are Umar minus 200, Merab plus 175. I think that's a pretty good line. I think that's respectful to Merab. Even though the run he's been on, Umar, it just seems perfectly made to take on his skill set. We'll break that down when we get to 311. Then on the other side, Makhachev. This could potentially be Islam's last fight at lightweight before he goes for a welterweight crown. This would be his 5th title win. Volk twice, took it off of Oliveira, and I'm forgetting one. there's not really another contender out there. The best case is Charles Oliveira, and Islam already dominated him the first time they fought. Oliveira would probably need another win too, since he lost to Arman Tsarukyan at UFC 300. Secondly and lastly, Michael Chandler versus Jorge Masvidal BMF fight has been teased on Twitter by both men. Michael Chandler, say what you will about his actual ability. He is an entertaining fighter. People like him. People want to see him fight. People like Jorge. Again, say what you will about Jorge's actual fighting ability. People like to see those guys fight. I think that makes perfect sense. They're almost in a Nate Diaz position where neither guy can challenge for a title. Masvidal has been retired for a little bit, but make fun fights. Chandler at 170. I'd actually love to see Chandler put the lights out on Masvidal. And Masvidal was the original holder of the BMF belt, so you got some history there. I don't know if they make a second BMF belt because Max has it currently, or they just make it a co-main. We'd have to see. Okay. UFC 310. Really good card from T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada, the home of the fight world. We're going to set a record for most fights covered in a podcast, and a Teep Show podcast. That's right. We're going over 7 fights today. All right. So buckle up. First fight is a prelims fight. Randy Brown plus 190 versus Brian Battle minus 230. Brian Battle had that fight in UFC Paris with a hellacious call out. This is a confusing line to me. It's a somewhat typical prospect that they're trying to put over versus an established fighter matchup. Brown's been in the UFC starting all the way back in 2015. He never really made the jump to top 15 status, but Brian Battle can get a fight away from it after that monstrous call out in Paris in September and another fight on his current 3-fight win streak. Battle's not a wrestler. He's not in anything. Like Alexander Pantoja, he doesn't have a signature defining skill, but where Pantoja is good to great everywhere, Battle is average to below average everywhere. He defends strike at a horrific, truly unbelievable 43%. That means 57% of the strikes thrown his way get through, although he does land 5.5 significant strikes per minute against taking 4 significant strikes a minute. Where Battle really, not where he thrives, but where he likes to fight is in a dirty boxing, clinch, and elbow setting. Watches, grappling against the cage. Watch his last fight against Kevin Jousset. Cardio's not great. Striking's not crisp. He spends the whole first round trying to get a takedown and doesn't get it. He may get it with like 4 seconds left. Eventually, both guys are gassed and sloppy. Battle gets him out of there. Just on the feet, though. It's stoppage on the feet. No knockout power. Randy Brown throws more variety with more power and, frankly, has better wins. He knocked out Muslim Salikov, a kickboxer, in the first round. And on UFC 302, he put a good striking performance against Elizu Zaleski dos Santos, who has knocked out Sean Strickland and should have knocked out Benoit Saint Denis. Brown is massive for 170. He's going to have a long reach advantage on Battle. He's mostly orthodox, but he will switch stances for short periods. He keeps his hand low a lot of the time because he can stay out of range of almost anyone with that big frame. Really agile guy. He's got good knees, jumping knees when guys swing for the fences or come in. Basically, I like Brown a lot in a striking matchup, which is what this should be. What would scare me is Battle, again, making this dirty, grappling against the cage and landing short punches, or really just controlling him against the cage, knees to the quad, things like that. In the Dos Santos fight, and Dos Santos is a better grappler than Battle, to be fair, but Dos Santos was able to control Brown for a lot of the second round with a takedown and dragged him back down to the mat again and again. Got some trips in the third. So Battle could win something really ugly, and I think that's the path to victory for Battle, an ugly victory. I don't see a knockout for him. I did just watch Battle fail to take down Jousset for a whole fight, and although Jousset is a judo guy, I don't see a huge, Russian-like advantage wrestling and grappling for Battle, the favorite. And that's where I assume the value comes in, or the lack of value for him as a favorite. As long as it stands, it should be Randy Brown. And for the juice you get as a dog, I love Randy Brown here. Next up is Movsar Evloev at minus 255 versus Aljo Sterling at plus 205. This is a matchup between a former champion and a man many have predicted is destined for greatness. Namely, is destined for a golden belt around his waist. There's a lot of discussion around the placement of this fight, namely that two premier fighters are on the prelims and not the main card. Namely that they're on the prelims in place of Kron Gracie versus Bryce Mitchell, the former of whom put together one of the most abominable, despicable performances in the modern era. At least this side of CM Punk. But anyways, let's let the Twitterverse get angry about that. They're fighting, and it's a massive, massive fight for featherweight. Evloev is on the Russian Dagestani fighting schedule. That is, he fights about 1.5 times a year, is highly selective about his opponents, and also no one wants to fight him. His strength of schedule is impressive when he gets a fight. He's 18 and freaking 0, okay? He beat Arnold Allen last time out. He beat Diego Lopez in 2023, and he beat Dan Ige in 2022. That's all the fights you have time for when you're fighting once a year. He gets a stylistic neutralizer in Aljo Sterling, who's the closest thing America has to a Dagestani at featherweight. You know Aljo's game. He's got funky boxing, loves a head kick each side, but really he wants to be the human backpack. The striking is just to set up submissions, grappling, ground and pound from the back. The best Sterling's ever looked is submitting Corey Sandhagen in a minute. The second best he's ever looked is the Petr Yan 2 fight, where he spent 2 rounds wholly controlling Yan on his back. Yan, to me, is one of the most dangerous men on the roster, and Aljo held out on the feet enough to win that fight and get his belt back, I should say. Or it was an interim. Yan was the interim, so he held it. Both these guys have decent striking arsenals, but they're just functional enough to get to the grappling, which is the main attraction. What's so interesting and boring for casuals and fun for real fans is that both guys are going to be happy grappling. Evloev is more of a control grappler, not hunting for subs, but looking for control and small punches here and there, where Aljo is more offensive, actively looking for a submission threat. I'm not going to get too technical here. Evloev has dominated basically Lopez and Allen, who are both top 5 featherweight fighters. Before you say Aljo's in a different category of grappling, he's not. Lopez is a 3rd-degree black belt, maybe 4th, maybe 5th, maybe 6th. He's on a Mount Rushmore of active BJJ guys. Evloev neutralizes that ability. He's a freight train, and I think he beats any featherweight on the planet. I think this is the last time you can get him at a competitive line, at least until he faces Ilia Topuria. So take the cash here, run. Amazingly, after that fight, we'll have 2 featherweights that are much worse, and this isn't in Korea, so I'm not exactly why they're fighting on the main card. Other than this fight is the one fight that's guaranteed to be an absolute banger. It is Nate Landwehr, minus 140 against Choi Do-Hoo, or Superboy, plus 110. This, like I said, is going to be an absolute slapper. It's almost guaranteed to end in a knockout. I mean, this is a great card we got, guys, period. Superboy rose to prominence in a loss to Cub Swanson that won Fight of the Year in 2016. He basically showed an unreasonable chin in that fight at 25 years old. He got cracked an outrageous amount of times and continued to come forward and land as well. Little Korean zombie in that fight. At his best, he's an explosive, powerful puncher with a semblance of a ground game. Really, he wants to stand and bang. 11 of his 14 fights since he turned 20 have ended with him knocking someone out or getting knocked out himself. He's a very live dog given that punching power, and he can put anyone's lights out with ease and rapidity. Unfortunately, he's going against a guy that owns one of the best comeback victories in the sport's history. Nate the Train was getting shellacked against David Onama badly. He got knocked out in the first round. He woke up because of more ground and pound. And he got a chance to come back, dominated the second with cardio against a gassed Onama. He eventually won via majority decision. He also has a win that's aging absolutely beautifully against Ludovic Klein. Nate the Train's one of the few Americans that went overseas and won a belt in K1, which is a real good European promotion. Excuse me. Why are we talking about the Onama win? Because it shows 3 things that are going to make Choi Do-Hoo's night miserable. First, fantastic cardio. Second, a chin to take a couple of Superboy's shots. And 3, cardio striking, almost a la Colby Covington, to stay in his face and pressure and make him pay if Superboy can't get him out early. Like Brown, I don't really understand the line here. There are many more holes in Superboy's game. Not much of a ground game, although typically you see some proficiency from Asian fighters over here. Landwehr has the wrestling advantage, the cardio advantage, and he's not that far behind on the feet. Where Superboy is crazily ahead is that power. It's almost a Derek Lewis feel to the fight. Can Superboy knock him out before the volume of Landwehr certainly wins rounds or the wrestling? I don't think so. I think Nate the Train is priced attractively and love him here. Okay, next on the main card is the one that's really causing all the commotion. Bryce Mitchell minus 910 versus Kron Gracie at a 5-1 underdog. Bryce is the second biggest favorite on the card. Let's talk about the positives of Kron Gracie. He's good looking. He comes from MMA royalty. He comes from the Gracie family. Okay. Bryce Mitchell is a jiu-jitsu guy, American Arkansas jiu-jitsu, one of the stupidest people to ever fight, but I also kind of love him. There was a picture of him and BJ Penn together at the UFC Performance Institute. The amount of CTE combined on those two guys is incredible. But I saw Bryce get sent to the Shadow Realm live against Josh Emmett. Bryce is actually a good fighter. Kron is not. The danger here in this line is that it seems like easy money should be a parlay anchor. The danger to me is that Bryce decides to engage in a jiu-jitsu match, which is literally the only skill that Kron has and the only path to victory. I'm staying away because Bryce indeed may be stupid enough to try to beat the Gracie in jiu-jitsu. And at 9-10, you're not getting enough value for what he should do, which is stay on the feet and strike, which is what Kron can't. Don't take this fight. Stay away. Oh, baby. This is so exciting. Cyril Gane minus 360 versus Volkov plus 270. Cyril Gane is the most exciting heavyweight not named Tom Aspinall. I don't care what anyone says. Who cares that he can't grapple? You know who else can't grapple? His opponent, Alexander Volkov, coming off of a dominant victory against a guy who I thought was the boogeyman of the heavyweight division, Sergey Pavlovich. If you go back and watch the fight, Pavlovich had put almost everyone's lights out that he fought, and he barely landed a punch on Volkov. This is most acutely summarized by Volkov's corner taking the time to comb his hair in between rounds instead of any actual fighting advice. Volkov had seemed to reach a plateau, gatekeeper. He was on the verge of a title fight before a really unlucky KO against Derek Lewis. Tom Aspinall armbarred him in a minute, and the Pavlovich fight, which many, including myself, assumed was just another building block for Sergey, turned out to be career revitalization for Volkov. He's now on a 4-fight win streak and figures to be Tom Aspinall's first title defense, or respectfully, John Jones' third if he stays around, with a win. Volkov lands 5.1 significant strikes per minute and only absorbs 3 really good numbers, pointing to a guy without much knockout power, but even better, the volume to stay on the outside, not get touched, and win rounds. He's the second best kickboxer in the heavyweight division. All good, right? Here's the problem. He's facing the best kickboxer in the heavyweight division, a man who he's already lost to in Cyril Gane. I want to throw that fight out. We shouldn't, but it was a really boring, no-action fight, which could absolutely happen again. What we've seen with Gane is that he knocks the snot out of anyone who wants to stand and trade. I mean, seriously, the best striking heavyweight ever, in my opinion. And he also lost a wrestling match to Francis Ngannou and got subbed by John Jones. Now, maybe I'm revealing my pick, but the fact that he was able to go 5 with Francis and not get knocked speaks very well to his striking defense. He's not going to have to worry about takedowns from Volkov. Ring rust is a little bit of a concern here. He hasn't fought for a full year, and Volkov just dominated. Volkov is hot, too, on his 4-fight win streak. The thing that would normally scare you about betting favorite heavyweights is that all it takes is one punch. The thing is, Volkov doesn't throw with that heat. He goes to decisions more frequently than not and doesn't seem to want to hunt KOs. So Volkov is not going to shoot takedowns, unlikely, but not impossible. And he's not going to knock Gane out, unlikely again, but also not impossible. I'll take the guy who's beat him before and who I think is the best heavyweight striker ever. I think the line is as close as it is because of that Pavlovich victory, but Gane doesn't need to blitz the strike, which Pavlovich does, and opened him up on the counter strike. I'll take Gane straight, and I'll take him in parlays. The fight I'm most excited for is this: Shavkat Rakhmonov minus 370 against Ian Machado Garry plus 270. This is the de facto interim welterweight title fight. If you don't know, Shavkat was announced to fight for the belt against newly crowned Bilal Muhammad. And when Bilal had a bone infection and needed 6 weeks to get better, Shavkat did one of the ballsiest, most cojones-fueled things I've ever seen in the sport. He decided to take another fight against another undefeated fighter instead of wait for his title shot. There's literally nothing to gain besides pride and everything to lose. It's the mark of a true fighter. We'll start with a heavy underdog, Ian Machado Garry. Garry is Ireland's next big thing after Conor McGregor, with 3 knockouts in his first 5 fights before beating the mess out of Neil Magny. After that, he really squeaked a split decision against Jeff Neal and arguably lost to Michael Venom Page. Now, Shavkat has fought Jeff Neal too. It was a brawl. Shavkat submitted him. Shavkat fought Neil Magny too. Submitted him as well. So this will be easy money for Shavkat, right? No, I don't think so. Garry's a real talent. His leg kicks are second to none in the division, and he'll weaponize them early and often. He's got excellent striking, although he can be tentative at times. That's probably the biggest knock on him from the fans' perspective. For every exciting fight, he'll throw in a plodding clunker as well. But he does what he needs to win, and he stands at 15-0. He's a high-volume striker when he wants to be. He's hit 127 and 116 significant strikes in UFC bouts. Some training footage came out where they looked very competitive in the stand-up, and I expect that to be the case in this fight as well. As long as Garry is standing, not clinching, he'll give Shavkat as much as he can handle. An issue is Garry has some durability concerns, some chin concerns. He's been dropped twice in the UFC by inferior opponents. Shavkat was able to freeze Jeff Neal with just a jab and put a ton of other damage on him. Jeff Neal's got a chin too. Even if Garry lands, Shavkat will likely be able to return, and I have more confidence in Rakhmonov's chin than Garry's. In fact, in Rakhmonov's chin than just about anyone in the division. He took a massive hook from Neal, and he smiled like the wind breezed by on his face. We aren't talking about the major discrepancy in this fight, at least not yet. Remember I said training footage came out of them sparring? Well, it did not include a crucial piece that Rakhmonov confirmed, that he also submitted Garry in training. I think Garry, even though he out-wrestled MVP Michael Venom Page, will be at a massive grappling disadvantage, particularly against the cage. Shavkat only averages 1.5 takedowns per fight. He's not a shoot-all-the-time guy, but once he gets there or against the fence, Garry is in imminent danger. I don't love the straight line on Shavkat. I could absolutely see a decision win for Garry, but I do absolutely love the submission prop for Shavi. The main event is one of the freshest matchups in recent history, as UFC flyweight champion Alexander Pantoja takes on promotional newcomer Kai Asakura. That is Pantoja minus 250, Asakura plus 200. Pantoja is a 3-time champion, taking the belt off of Brandon Moreno before beating Brandon Royval and Steve Erceg in defenses. He's been the most active UFC champion of recent times, with this being his 4th title fight in 18 months. Pantoja is nothing if not well-rounded and tough, which is a hell of a combination to put together. He's a Muay Thai base, but very good wrestling and ability to get to your back and on your back, and he is a submission threat at all times. Since he's not a knockout artist, you do see him go later into fights often, but the great cardio means he's active all 5 rounds. He's also freaking durable. Only Davison Figueiredo, has knocked him down, not out. Who is Kai Asakura? He's an exciting guy who fought in Rizin, arguably the preeminent Asian promotion, and he's coming back off back-to-back knee knockouts. TKO, who punches with his knees and hands. He has a couple fights to UFC and Bellator fighters. He lost by KO to Manel Kopp, who's in this division. And he lost to Kyoji Horiguchi by knockout as well. To be fair, he also beat Juan Archuleta, who's a former Bellator champ. He's orthodox with good movement, typical of a flyweight. He competed at bantamweight in Rizin, and he's dropping down for this fight. I think that's why the line is where it is. Because Pantoja has turned back again and again. The elite of this flyweight division. Asakura has been knocked down in his last fight and out in other fights. I have concerns about his durability, although, again, Pantoja is not exactly a bomber. I think the value or the line is thinking this is a bigger fighter in Asakura coming into the UFC's vaunted Performance Institute and the help that they give with the weight cut, and that he'll be bigger in the ring. That's fine, but Asakura also has a new rule set to deal with, and he's a little bit of a sloppier brawler. Pantoja is technical. He's good, man. And he trains at American Top Team, one of the best gyms in the world. This is really a complete guess because we haven't seen Asakura, but I'll take the devil I know over the devil I don't. The knee game is impressive, but is that something you can reliably, rely on? I know that Pantoja's ground game, striking, and cardio are all there. I'll ride with that. So the play, Randy Brown plus 190, Cyril Gahn minus 360, Shavkat sub. We have a quick mailbag. That's 310, guys. That's a hell of a card. I didn't watch. I watched 309. I will definitely be watching 310 from prelims up. It's going to be crazy. Quick mailbag. What is the most underrated fight in UFC history? I've said this fight before in my favorite fights, but I'll say it again here. For me, it's Khamzat versus Gilbert Burns because they didn't even win Fight of the Year. And I think it's the greatest fight of all time. Some off the top of my head, Landwehr, Onama was great. Matt Schnell versus, I think it was Sudaji. You know, things like all of Joanna's fights, JJ, they're properly rated. They're classics, but they are what they are. What do you think the fighter's favorite Christmas cookie is based on their fighting style? Shavkat likes a horse cookie. I know that. Lastly, what are the chances John Jones ducks Aspinall? I thought they were higher before the Stipe fight. He looked so good in the Stipe fight. I think he got more confidence. And in the post-fight, it seemed like it was a money issue, not a desire issue. I was worried about the desire of losing his legacy, but it seems like he just wants to be compensated. And I'm not saying that the UFC's got the best record with that, but I was worried that he was just scared of Tommy, and it seems like he's willing to do it. I don't see the Francis fight happening, so I'm going to put that Francis fight at like a 5%. Dana just hates to cross-promote with people. I'm going to say the chances JJ ducks Aspinall are 25%. 20% he just retires, and 5% that they do Francis instead. That is all for us. That is the Teep Show. Thank you so much for listening again. We'll be back after 310 with a recap, and we'll see you guys soon.